44.4% of all U.S. home sales now include seller concessions. Nearly half of sellers are literally paying buyers to take their homes. Florida has lost a staggering $109 billion in housing value, while Las Vegas inventory exploded 66% year-over-year. Austin has 17,000 active listings, with 51% slashed in price, and Seattle sellers are offering concessions worth $40,000 per deal. Days on market have doubled, cancellations are spiking, and entire markets are flipping to buyers overnight. This isn't a slowdown, it's a collapse. Today, we reveal the 10 U.S. states where home sellers are panicking the most. Number 10. Georgia. Georgia's housing market is cracking under pressure, and sellers are panicking like never before. In Metro Atlanta, the heart of the state's housing engine, inventory has surged 36.8% year-over-year, ballooning to more than 20,500 active listings. To put that into perspective, that's nearly 6,000 more homes sitting unsold compared to last year. Homes that once flew off the market in just 14 to 20 days are now dragging at 47 to 60 days on market, leaving sellers desperate for offers. Prices aren't holding up either. The median sales price in Atlanta has slipped 1.8% year-over-year, down from roughly $415,000 to around $407,000. And that decline is accelerating in suburban counties where oversupply is even worse. Concessions, once unheard of in Georgia's red-hot market, are now routine. Nearly 61.5% of all Atlanta home sales include seller concessions, meaning sellers are paying buyers closing costs, offering rate buydowns, or flat-out slashing asking prices. That's not a negotiation, that's capitulation. Builders are making things worse. New subdivisions around Atlanta and Savannah are flooding the market with inventory, pushing months of supply to 4.6 months, dangerously close to the 5-month threshold that officially tips the balance into a buyer's market. Compare that to last year's 3.2 months, and you'll see why homeowners are terrified. A property that might have attracted 10 offers in 2022 is now lucky to get one lowball bid in 2025. And here's the real shocker. Contract cancellations in Georgia are spiking, with nearly 1 in 5 deals collapsing before closing. Buyers are walking away even after contracts are signed, realizing prices are still falling. Georgia sellers aren't just reducing prices, they're begging buyers to take their homes. This isn't a slowdown, it's the unraveling of the Georgia housing dream. Number 9. Washington. Washington's housing market isn't just cooling, it's turning icy cold. Seattle, once the darling of the West Coast, has collapsed into a buyer's playground. Active listings have jumped to more than 17,000 homes, a 41% surge year-over-year, and the average days on market has stretched from 18 days in 2022 to over 52 days in 2025. For sellers who grew used to bidding wars that drove homes $100,000 over asking, this reversal feels like freefall. The median listing price in Seattle has dropped 12% year-over-year, slipping from nearly $750,000 to $660,000. But the true panic shows up in concessions. 71.3% of all home sales in Washington now include seller giveaways, nearly double last year's figure. Think about that. 7 out of 10 homes require the seller to pay part of the buyer's costs just to close the deal. In practical terms, that's sellers forking over $20,000 to $40,000 per transaction. Condo owners are the hardest hit. In King County, more than 65% of condos have had price reductions, with some units slashed by 25% or more. Meanwhile, contract cancellations are climbing, with nearly 15% of pending deals falling apart as buyers recognize the market's downward spiral. Even the suburbs aren't safe. Tacoma and Spokane have seen inventory surge 35%, pushing supply levels to nearly 5.2 months, well into buyer market territory. For perspective, a healthy market is 4 months of supply. Washington is already past that line. Sellers are learning the hard way. 2022's fantasy prices are gone, and clinging to them only means your home sits rotting on the MLS. Washington isn't correcting, it's unraveling. And for homeowners, the nightmare is just beginning. Number 8. Colorado. Colorado, the state that once symbolized limitless demand, is spiraling into a crisis of oversupply and collapsing condo values. Denver alone has ballooned to 13,197 active listings, up 37% year-over-year, the highest July inventory in over a decade. Sellers who once bragged about same-day offers are now staring at 52-day averages on market, a shocking reversal from just 19 days in 2021. The median home price statewide has slipped from a peak of $565,000 in 2022 down to $495,000 in mid-2025, a 12.3% decline. That translates to nearly $70,000 in evaporated equity per home. Condos are ground zero for this collapse. 77.2% of Denver condos have had price cuts, the highest rate in the nation. Entire high-rise buildings are slashing asking prices floor by floor, leaving early buyers underwater on their mortgages. Builder overconfidence is compounding the disaster. Colorado's new construction pipeline has dumped thousands of unsold homes on the market, pushing months of supply to nearly 5.5 months, far above buyer market territory. Incentives are soaring. Builders are now offering up to $40,000 in mortgage buydowns and free upgrades, an unthinkable tactic just 2 years ago. Even Colorado Springs, once a migration hotspot, has seen inventory surge 30%, with the average home now sitting 63 days before selling. Buyers know the leverage is theirs. Nearly 38% of sales in Colorado involve price reductions, while another 59% include concessions. That means the majority of sellers aren't just cutting prices, they're literally paying buyers to close. Colorado homeowners who thought their equity was untouchable are learning the harsh truth. 2025 looks less like a correction and more like a controlled demolition. Number 7. Oregon. Oregon's housing market is in full-blown distress, with Portland leading the collapse. Active listings statewide have climbed nearly 28% year-over-year, reaching more than 18,000 homes. But in Portland itself, the pain is worse. Inventory is up 35%, pushing supply to nearly 5.3 months, the highest since 2011. The median listing price in Portland has crashed from $540,000 in 2022 to about $472,000 in 2025, a 12.6% drop. That's nearly $68,000 of lost equity per homeowner. Sellers are bleeding cash on concessions too. 63.9% of Oregon home sales now include seller assistance, up from 34% last year. These assistance packages aren't just small incentives, they're tens of thousands in closing cost coverage, mortgage buydowns, and disguised price cuts. Days on market have exploded. A home that once sold in just 11 days in 2021 now lingers for 48 to 55 days. In Salem and Eugene, the trend is even worse, with properties averaging 60-plus days before going under contract. Condo markets in Oregon are collapsing outright. More than 58% of Portland condos have had price reductions, many slashed by 20% or more. Contract cancellations are also on the rise, with nearly 1 in 6 deals failing to close. Buyers are using inspection contingencies and financing clauses to walk away, betting prices will be lower in 6 months. Oregon's pandemic-era boom has flipped into a bust. Migration inflows that once supported demand have slowed, leaving behind bloated inventory and desperate sellers. For homeowners, the dream of 2022 equity highs has evaporated into a nightmare of slashed prices and endless concessions. Number 6. Maryland. Maryland's housing market is unraveling fast, and the cracks are most visible in Baltimore and its surrounding suburbs. Active listings have jumped nearly 31% year-over-year, pushing statewide inventory above 22,000 homes. That might not sound catastrophic until you look at the months of supply. 5.1 months statewide, the first time in over a decade, Maryland has officially crossed into buyer's market territory. Prices are bending under the weight of oversupply. The median sales price in Maryland, which peaked around $435,000 in 2022, has fallen to roughly $389,000 in 2022-2025, a 10.5% decline, wiping out over $46,000 in equity for the average homeowner. In Baltimore City, the pain is even sharper. Homes that were selling for $320,000 2 years ago are now struggling to fetch $275,000, a decline of more than 14%. Concessions are exploding. 58% of all Maryland home sales now include seller incentives, ranging from mortgage rate buydowns worth $15,000 to full coverage of buyer closing costs. Builders in suburban counties like Howard and Anne Arundel are offering upgrades and discounts averaging $25,000 per home just to clear inventory. Days on market are spiking. In 2022, the average Maryland listing sat for 19 days. In 2025, that number is 52 days, with many Baltimore listings rotting for over 70 days without offers. Contract cancellations are also surging. 18% of pending sales fell through last quarter, leaving sellers blindsided at the closing table. Maryland's problem is simple: stagnant population growth, bloated inventory, and overpriced homes that no longer match buyer demand. The result is a perfect storm of falling prices, mounting concessions, and sellers realizing too late that the market they once relied on has flipped entirely against them. Number 5. North Carolina. North Carolina's housing market has flipped from boomtown glory to buyer's leverage central. Charlotte, once the symbol of surging demand, now leads the state in oversupply. Active listings in Charlotte alone have exploded 42.6% year over year, climbing past 14,000 homes, while Raleigh isn't far behind with a 45.4% surge, ranking third nationally for inventory growth. The median sales price across the state has declined 4.2% year over year, sliding from $395,000 in 2024 to $378,000 in 2025. In Raleigh, homes that peaked at $410,000 are now closer to $370,000, stripping nearly $40,000 in equity from homeowners who bought at the top. But the real panic lies in concessions. In Charlotte, over 55% of sales now include seller assistance, with average packages worth $18,000 per deal. Builders are offering mortgage buydowns, free appliances, and even property tax offsets just to unload their unsold inventory. Days on market have stretched from 25 days in 2022 to 47 to 64 days in 2025, depending on the metro, while contract cancellations hover around 15% statewide. North Carolina's affordability advantage is gone. Rapid price growth during the pandemic pushed many homes beyond the reach of local buyers, and now the slowdown is colliding with rising inventory. Renters aren't converting to buyers because mortgage rates make the math worse, and transplants from the Northeast and Midwest have slowed to a trickle. The result? A state that once symbolized opportunity is now a case study in oversupply and falling prices. Sellers here are not just negotiating, they're outright begging buyers to close. Number 4. Tennessee. Tennessee was supposed to be bulletproof. For years, cities like Nashville and Knoxville were magnets for migration and investors. But in 2025, even Tennessee's market is buckling. Nashville alone has seen active inventory surge 29% year over year, pushing available listings above 8,200 homes. Statewide, months of supply has ballooned to 4.86 months, up from just 3.33 months last year, marking a 46% increase in 1 year. The median sales price in Tennessee has flattened and now declined 2.8% year over year, slipping from $494,000 to $480,000. That's small compared to Florida or Texas, but it's the first crack in what was once the South's strongest housing market. More alarming, homes in suburban Nashville that fetched $600,000 at the peak are now struggling to hit $520,000, a 13% drop. Concessions are where the desperation shows. In 2025, nearly 33% of all Tennessee sales include seller concessions, up from just 12% 2 years ago. Builders in booming counties like Williamson and Rutherford are offering $20,000 mortgage buydowns, free home upgrades, and even HOA fee coverage for the first year. Days on market are climbing too. Nashville homes that once sold in under 2 weeks now linger for 62 days on average, a 19% increase year over year. Statewide, contract cancellations are hitting 14%, with buyers walking away rather than overpaying in a falling market. Tennessee was once the last southern metro showing growth, but the narrative has flipped. Migration has slowed, affordability has eroded, and buyers now hold all the cards. Sellers in Tennessee are learning the same harsh lesson as everywhere else. The housing frenzy is dead, and panic is replacing confidence. Number 3. Nevada. Nevada's housing market, led by Las Vegas, has fallen harder than the desert sun at dusk. The very city that once symbolized red-hot demand and frenzied bidding wars is now a graveyard of "for sale" signs. Las Vegas inventory has exploded 66% year-over-year, climbing to nearly 10,000 active listings, the sharpest increase of any major U.S. metro. To put that into perspective, there were just 6,000 listings a year ago. Now, entire neighborhoods are lined with homes that simply aren't moving. Supply has ballooned to 4 months of inventory, more than double the frenzied 2021 lows. Days on market, which once hovered at just 12 days in 2021, have spiked to 46 days, with many properties sitting well past 60 days without offers. The bidding war mania of buyers waiving inspections and tossing $50,000 over asking is gone, buried. Today's buyers are doing the opposite, demanding concessions, clawing down prices, and forcing sellers to sweeten deals with everything from paid closing costs to mortgage rate buydowns. Median home prices have collapsed from their May 2022 peak of $440,000 to around $378,000 in mid-2025, a 14% drop, vaporizing over $60,000 of equity per household. The luxury market hasn't been spared either. Homes priced over $1 million are piling up with few serious offers. But the real shocker is contract instability. Nearly 1 in 5 deals in Las Vegas are falling apart before closing, as buyers realize they can wait for further declines. Investors who bought short-term rentals during the boom are now unloading properties at losses, choking the market with supply. Sellers aren't just reducing prices, they're outright panicking, cutting aggressively just to avoid bankruptcy. Nevada isn't in a soft landing, it's in a free fall. And Las Vegas, once the poster child of housing euphoria, is now the epicenter of America's housing unraveling. Number 2. Texas. Texas, long marketed as the land of endless opportunity, has been blindsided by a tidal wave of housing oversupply. Austin, the state's poster child for pandemic-era migration, is the clearest example of just how bad things have gotten. As of May 2025, Austin sits on 17,337 active listings, a record-breaking figure representing a 51% year-over-year surge. For the first time in over a decade, more than half of all homes on the market in Austin, 51.4%, have had at least one price reduction. Median home prices in Austin have collapsed from their May 2022 peak of $550,000 to $455,000 in mid-2025, a staggering 17.3% decline that has erased nearly $95,000 in equity per homeowner. That's not just a market correction, it's a wealth decimation. Across Texas, the picture isn't much brighter. The state has hemorrhaged $32 billion in housing value in just 1 year. Concessions are flooding the market. In Dallas and Houston, more than 36% of all home sales include price reductions, with average concessions topping $20,000 per deal. Builders are making it worse. With 119,000 unsold completed homes nationwide, Texas is one of the hardest-hit states for overbuilding. Builders in Houston suburbs are offering incentives worth up to $50,000 per home, covering closing costs, mortgage buydowns, and even throwing in free luxury upgrades. Days on market tell the rest of the story. Homes in Austin that sold in under 10 days in 2021 are now dragging at 68 days on average. Statewide, contract cancellations are surging, with San Antonio leading the nation at 22.7% of contracts canceled, nearly 1 in 4 deals dead before closing. Texas homeowners who thought migration would keep demand high are waking up to a brutal reality. Too much inventory, collapsing prices, and desperate sellers giving away equity to stay afloat. The Lone Star housing dream is cracking wide open. Number 1. Florida. Florida's housing crash isn't just severe, it's catastrophic. No state in America has shed more value or seen more sellers in outright panic mode. Over the past year alone, Florida has lost $109 billion in housing value. That's not a typo. $109 billion gone. Miami, Orlando, Tampa, Cape Coral, every major market is drowning in inventory. Miami leads the collapse with 42,000 active listings, representing nearly 6 months of supply, the highest since the Great Recession. The median listing price has cratered by 12% year over year, falling from $598,000 to $525,000. Orlando has reached 5.31 months of supply, officially flipping into buyer's market territory, with homes taking 51 days to sell, nearly double last year's pace. Tampa homes now linger for 46 days, up 70% from 27 days last year, while Cape Coral is ground zero for the crash, with price reductions on more than 40% of all listings. Concessions are everywhere. In Tampa, nearly 30% of sellers are covering closing costs. In Fort Lauderdale, contract cancellations have reached 21.3%, meaning more than 1 in 5 deals collapse before closing. Buyers are walking away rather than overpaying in a free-falling market. Builders are in full-blown panic mode. In Florida, 80% of new projects now include incentives, with packages worth tens of thousands. National builder Lennar is offering discounts equal to 13.3% of sales price. On a $400,000 home, that's $53,200 in incentives just to get buyers through the door. Insurance costs are pouring gasoline on the fire. Premiums in Florida now average $6,000 to $10,000 annually, pushing buyers out of affordability. That's forcing even more listings to stagnate. Florida is no longer just a correction story. It's the epicenter of America's 2025 housing crash. Sellers here aren't negotiating. They're panicking, capitulating, and watching billions in value evaporate.